Next up is Susie Arnold from the Island Institute. Susie is their senior ocean scientist and director of their Center for Climate and Community. And she's going to share with us the science of hope.
So thank you, everyone. It's good to be here. Forgive me if I'm not on my A game today. I've been taking care of a sick child for the last 4 days. It's rather exhausting. As Ellen mentioned, my name is Susie Arnold. I'm the senior ocean scientist at the Island Institute. I am a marine biologist by training. Tracy and the organizers invited me to come here to talk about a topic that is the clinical psychologist's topic by training. But I'm going to dive into a little bit of the science of hope, which I do think is an important message to include in an event like today. Let's see here. Oops. So first, just a little bit of background. So as a marine biologist who studies ocean climate change, I'm often asked to give presentations about topics that have to do with ocean climate change, and they're often rather depressing. Warming waters, increasing ocean acidification, invasive species, you name it. And it tends to leave people with a feeling of despair. And one of the questions that I get most often after these presentations is, in the face of all this bad news, what gives you hope? And so I just wanted to stress that time after time, my answer pretty much remains the same. And it is participating in events like this that are organized by community volunteers, where we've got auditoriums packed with dedicated folks who are all here to take action on climate. And after leaving events like this, I find myself even more motivated personally to take action on climate change. So before I dive into that science of hope, which I've been asked to talk about, I'm going to share a quick story about why me, a marine biologist, is talking about the science of hope. So as I mentioned, I give a lot of doom and gloom science presentations, and it was a couple years ago. I was coming out of the pandemic. We were finally back in person, and I was giving a lecture to a fisheries-dependent community talking about ocean climate change. And I ended the presentation, and one of the members was practically in tears in response to kind of all of the challenges facing their coastal community. And at that moment, I thought, wow, I need to change something about the way I'm communicating science. And I had recently participated in a staff training at the Island Institute, where we were introduced to the concept of the theory of the science of hope. And seeing that urgent need for hope, I thought I'd do a little bit more digging into what that was all about. So I'm going to share with you, again, what I've learned from my perspective about the science of hope. So what I've learned is that really hope is more than just a feeling. Just as we can measure changes in climate variables, we can also, or psychologists can also measure hope, and they've been doing so for more than 30 years. So when I began digging into this, I typically read publications about ocean acidification. I actually found that there are more published scientific articles about the science of hope than there are about things like ocean acidification. So it really is a robust body of literature that has been going on for over 30 years. And so the hope theory construct is really about 3 different parameters. One is goal setting. You really have to have a meaningful goal. And this is a meaningful goal that means something to you, not that means something to someone else, but that you have to have a real passion behind achieving that goal. Secondly, you have to have agency thinking. So you have to have the knowledge and the determination that gives you the confidence that you can achieve your goal. And so some ways to improve your agency and get that knowledge is by attending things like you're doing today. And lastly, you have to have pathways thinking. And this is having a plan and the willingness to modify or adjust your plan. So importantly, hope is more about optimism. It's very much about taking action. And without the pathways thinking, it's merely wishful thinking. Okay, so taking a hope-based approach to climate communications is really important. Actually, Maine-based physicians have reported that climate change is worsening the mental health and well-being of their patients. So climate anxiety has been shown to lead to both action, but also to paralysis. So importantly, hope has been shown to increase climate action more than anxiety. So taking this frame can be more effective than simply sharing facts about a problem. Hence the real need to promote feelings of constructive hope to encourage climate action. Now, particularly with youth who may be experiencing climate anxiety, particularly those around the age of high school where they can really understand the consequences of climate change and how it's going to impact their future, it's important to create opportunities for discussion and supply opportunities for them to exercise their agency and avenues for them to take meaningful action. And lastly, this last publication that you can see folks from GMRI might recognize, it came from a symposium that was done, I think, back in 2019, maybe. Anyway, several years ago, about the Gulf of Maine in 2050. And this was a social scientist who presented on this at that symposium. But it was really about empowering hope-based climate change communication techniques for the Gulf of Maine. And the message there was that communication models that further engagement the most in climate conversations have three things. They have the head, so there's the understanding of climate change, the heart, and then the hands, which is giving them an intention to participate. Okay, so one of the single best predictors of hope is actually our connectedness with each other. Meaning an important component to nurture hope is through social outlets, like showing up for this event or getting involved in a local climate action group. These also build social capital or strong relationships, which make communities not just more resilient, but better situated for disaster preparedness and response. And having worked at the Island Institute now for over 12 years, I really saw that important piece about social connectedness in the response of many coastal communities after the January storms. I mean, I live in a fairly large city for the state of Maine, and our response was not as coordinated as some of the small island communities that I work with. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that people know their neighbors and they feel that social connectedness with the people around them, and they can really rely on them. So these types of engagements are also critical so that people can see themselves in the solutions that we choose to tackle to take on climate change. Solutions can come from the top down all we want, but in order for a community really see themselves in completing that strategy or moving towards that action, they need to be able to see themselves in that solution. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's a great distinction between hoping, which is all about action, and wishing, which is passive. Oh, I'd really like to do something about this, but I don't think there's much I can do. So I wanted to end this talk about hope by linking this hope theory construct to Maine's climate action plan, which is called Maine Won't Wait, and to flag an immediate kind of pathway that you all can take to weigh in on Maine's climate planning process, which is underway right now at the state level. I really see a lot of similarities between Maine's climate planning process and this hope construct. The Climate Action Plan lays out incremental goals. It's updated every 4 years. It provides agency through the planning process and pathways for its goals to be achieved. And I just wanted to back up a little bit for those not familiar with Maine's climate action planning process. Back in 2019, Governor Mills signed into law the legislation to create the Maine Climate Council. It also created the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee that informs the work of the Maine Climate Council and the 6 working groups. The Maine Climate Council itself is a 39-member panel consisting of scientists and industry leaders, state agency staff, and its charge is to develop Maine's climate action plan. The last one was released in 2020. And the next iteration will be updated and is due to the legislature on December 1st of 2024. It also created the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee, which is responsible for identifying the impacts of climate change on Maine. And the STS, as we're known, just released its 2024 scientific assessment back in June. The equity subcommittee, importantly, was created to ensure that benefits across diverse population, or benefits are spread across diverse populations in Maine, and that we have a diversity of voices informing the climate action plan. Lastly, the 6 working groups are comprised of over 200 volunteers that recommend strategies to the Maine Climate Council for achieving Maine's climate action plans goals. I wanted to point you to that opportunity where you can participate in this process. The Maine Climate Council is currently considering the recommendations of these 6 working groups as we speak. They were presented, the 6 working groups presented their recommendations to the Climate Council on June 18th. And up here you can see the link where you can go and see what those recommendations are. And under each of the working groups' recommendations, you can take a survey to help prioritize what you think the Maine Climate Council should be prioritizing in the next action plan, which I said is to be released in less than 6 months now. The working groups, so I wanted to pick out which was most relevant to this particular discussion today. And the working groups that have recommendations that pertain particularly to coastal bluffs are the Community Resilience Working Group and the Coastal and Marine Working Group. There is a lot of information on this website, and I would never expect anyone to, unless you're on the Climate Council, to read all of this. But there are these small opportunities for the public to weigh in on what we think is most important. And you can take the survey directly linked to some of these particular recommendations by going to this website. I'm about to finish up, but I wanted to share a direct quote coming from the Community Resilience Working Group that I think really encapsulates a newfound emphasis on the link between climate change and mental health. And the Community Resilience Working Group, in their final recommendations, said the following: if we are to be successful in achieving our goals and mitigating harm, we must address such factors as resilience, mental health, hope, engagement, communication, and leadership. Such crucial omissions explain many of the difficulties climate leaders encounter in reaching diverse populations, inspiring action, and sustaining engagement. So I'm very pleased to see this emphasis on the link between mental health, the importance of hope, and how it pertains to climate change in the climate planning process at the state level. So lastly, if anyone is interested in pursuing more information about the science of hope and how it's linked to climate action, I wrote a short column in the Working Waterfront newspaper last month, and then there's a longer referenced chapter in the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee's most recent report on the effects of climate change in Maine, and you can find that. It closes out the report. With that, thank you for inviting me to talk about this topic, and I'll turn it over to Gail.